The Wizard of Oz won an Oscar for Best Score, along with bringing home another Oscar for Best Original Song for the well-known Over the Rainbow. According to the Library of Congress, it is the single most watched film of all time. So many of us have seen it. Memories of the beloved characters fill our childhoods, but few people know the true brutality and suffering the cast and crew endured while creating this iconic piece of history. The true horror, the people behind the happy faces of the characters of this film were made to withstand, were and are still largely unknown or just blatantly ignored. The Wizard of Oz won an Oscar for Best Score, along with bringing home another Oscar for the Best Original Song for the well-known Over the Rainbow. According to the Library of Congress, it is the single most watched film of all time. So many of us have seen it. Memories of the beloved characters fill our childhoods, but few people know the true brutality and suffering the cast and crew endured while creating this iconic piece of history. The true horror the people behind this film were made to withstand, were and are largely unknown or just blatantly ignored. Today we are going to discuss the atrocious things the actors and actresses as well as the studio crew were expected and required to tolerate in order to be a part of what would one day be an iconic film for so many. Hello, I am pretty pessimistic and I am so glad you are here with me today. To those of you returning, I apologize for the delay in posting. Things in my life have been a bit stressful and I do want to say I'm sorry. I hope you're still sticking with me even though I disappeared for a couple weeks. If you are new, thanks for choosing this video and I hope you enjoy it. I'm pretty pessimistic. We discuss disturbing content from true crime to conspiracies and even morbid history. Occasionally the paranormal and all types of creepy things. We are pessimists who enjoy the questionable and the unknown. I don't want to get distracted. Let's buckle up and we are jumping right in. And today's topic is honestly insane. I can't believe that at any point a lack of laws and regulations made way for such heinous working conditions to exist. The 1930s were host to years of economic depression due to the stock market crash. Housing prices plummeted, deflation soared, and unemployment rose to 25%. Many households were forced to adapt and establish more contemporary forms of frugality, although their new circumstances, for the most part, left many despondent. They began looking for new ways to create and experience joy and happiness. One way people chose to have fun was going to the movies. Some merchants even gave free movie showings, which would have been beneficial, and even when the movies weren't free, people still went to see them. The glamorous movie scenes, the movie stars, and a peek at high society got people dreaming of a better life, and even if only for a moment, it made them forget the trials of the time. Economic instability, homelessness, unemployment, and so much more. While so many toiled to find a job that paid, Hollywood was entering what some would call the golden age. With so many flocking to the theaters to negate the constant negativity, the companies making the films were the ones on top, MGM being one of the ones ahead of the game. In 1937, Disney created an animated musical fantasy film based on the 1812 fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. This animated film was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It showed how successful films adapted from popular children's stories could be. MGM wanted some of that fairy tale success, so they quickly followed suit of Disney and chose a children's story of their own. MGM bought the rights to L. Frank Baum's The Magic of Oz. L. Frank Baum wrote the novel in honor of his late niece. He and his wife visited his newborn niece during the writing of the book. His young niece unfortunately passed away at 5 months old, which I am sure devastated the family. In an effort to ease the family's grief, even just a little bit, Baum decided to name the main character of his book after his niece, Dorothy. With the rights to The Wizard of Oz secured, the characters were cast, crew was hired, and Victor Fleming began directing the film adaptation. Fleming began in October 1938, and it lasted 5 months, ending in March 1939. The film had a $2.8 million budget at the time, which would be equivalent to $51.3 million today. The film was characterized by its use of Technicolor. It took the art department a week to finally settle on a shade of yellow for the famous Yellow Brick Road. On February 12, 1939, Victor Fleming decided to move on and replace the director in Gone with the Wind, and the very next day, he was replaced by his friend King Vidor, who finished the filming of The Wizard of Oz, but he chose not to take credit until Fleming's death in 1949. Upon release on August 25, 1939, The Wizard of Oz was considered a commercial failure. MGM eventually sold the rights to televise the film to CBS for $225,000. That was equal to around $1.6 million today. And finally, 17 years later, on November 3, 1956, The Wizard of Oz was shown on television for the first time, just in time for the holidays. CBS showed the film again on December 13, 1959. This solidified the showing as an annual tradition, and the rest is history. Special editions, cassettes, DVDs, Blu-rays, releases, re-releases. The film is even returning to theaters June 5th and 6th of this year, 2022, to celebrate Judy Garland, the actress who played Dorothy's 100th birthday. Needless to say, the film became iconic, a traditional part of so many childhoods. But what if I told you this happy, magic-filled, fantastical fairy tale following a farm girl from Kansas that we all think to be a wonderful memory from our youth has an abundance of nightmarish details from behind the scenes that could fuel some of the darkest childhood memories we have? What if I told you there are so many gruesome details surrounding this film, you could discuss each member of the cast and their own videos and still have enough terrible stories for more? From exposure to asbestos, physical abuse, chemical exposure, extreme diets, and even possible SA, the terrors behind the scenes of The Wizard of Oz know no bounds. First and foremost, the unfair wages. During the time of filming, Judy Garland, who played the main character Dorothy, made around $500 a week, which would be equivalent to about $9,000 a week today. But when you compare that to her male co-stars, then the inequality really starts to show. Jack Haley, who played the character the Tin Man, and Ray Bolger, who played the Scarecrow, were the highest paid, who made around $3,000 a week, which was equivalent to around $54,000 a week today, compared to Judy's $9,000 a week. I mean, even Toto, the cute little pup in the film, made $135 a week, which would now be equivalent to around $2,000 a week. Dorothy made closer to the dog's wage than the human male co-stars. This isn't the only way they treated Judy unfairly either. They also required her to be a certain weight for the film, so they forced the already small 4'11" girl to lose 12 pounds before the filming even started and put her on an extreme diet. When I say extreme, I don't mean keto or all fluid or any kind of diet you've heard of. No, I mean black coffee, chicken broth soup, and cigarettes. That was Judy Garland's diet for almost 6 months, at the very least. On top of that, she was consistently given what she called pep pills, as well as sleeping pills. Essentially, it is speculated that MGM Studios was the cause of Judy Garland's lifetime full of and eventually death by drug abuse. But know this, the speculation isn't whether MGM gave minor Judy, as well as other young actresses on the set, drugs. They definitely did. The confusion is whether or not MGM or Judy's mom was the first to give her the drugs, because her mom may have been doing it before her contract with MGM even started. Judy wasn't the only person who was on special diets. The actor Burt Lahr was on a liquid diet for a period during the filming, only eventually being allowed a non-liquid lunch. There were countless physical injuries caused by countless different reckless reasons. Lack of care by the studio, such as possible XA by Munchkins. The actress who played the Wicked Witch, Margaret Hamilton, this poor woman suffered third-degree burns, and her stunt double also suffered a serious accident when her broom exploded during a scene. The crew was not safe either. The film set was so hot that it was almost lethal. Not only the cast who were in heavy costumes were faint, but the crew who were not in the heavy costumes were known to pass out on set. So these people were literally burned alive, and they were probably in such danger of dehydration. Not only was it astoundingly hot, some of the lights the studio used were so bright that some people's vision was permanently affected after being on set. The costumes the actors wore, well, you guessed it, those were extremely toxic, dangerous too, so the paints they used ravaged their lungs. The aluminum used in the paint of the Tin Man, and the green copper-filled poisonous paint on the Wicked Witch. I know she was the quote-unquote villain, but Margaret Hamilton, the real woman, just played a part. Between the poison paint and the extreme burns and even a hospitalization with no support from MGM, that caused it. I'd say it sounds like someone was really out to get her. I mean, really. Judy too. All of them, honestly. No, the studio MGM just literally did not care at all about any of their employees. Not even the smallest sliver of empathy for their lower level employees. And by lower level, I mean anyone who wasn't a man in a suit whose name you're lucky to even see in the credits of the movie. The costume of the Cowardly Lion actor, Burt Lahr, was a real lion's hide, and it weighed close to 100 pounds. And of course, it's a lion's hide. I would assume it was extremely hot. I mean, very, very, very hot. There's actually no need to assume it was burning hot to wear that costume. The actor who played the Scarecrow had permanent indentions in his cheeks from the rubber mask he wore. And worst of all, his suit was made with asbestos. And so was parts of the witch's broom. And unsurprisingly, but absolutely shockingly, stupidly, and again with no regard to their employees, they also used asbestos, specifically chirocetyl or chirocetyl asbestos, the white kind, in one rather iconic scene. When the characters wake in the field of poppies and it snows down on the actors, creating a dreamy scene. Well, the snow is pure asbestos. It is a dreamland of toxic, death-causing snow. And they just cover them in it, all over. And let it be known, this was a common practice on film sets around the time. On sets, they often used this asbestos as a decoration, especially for holiday Christmas movies, because it resembled snow. That also explains the asbestos brand names, such as Pure White or White Magic. It was pure white and looked just like snow. but it was extremely toxic. Asbestos, for anyone who doesn't know, is a mineral fiber with the ability to break down into microscopically thin fibers that will become airborne, and they stay in the air for days. Then people breathe it in and it will become lodged in their lung tissue and then cause very serious diseases. Diseases such as asbestosis, which is a scarring of the lung tissue, and many different kinds of lung cancers. Specifically, one that is very scary is mesothelioma, which is a cancer of the lining of the lung cavity. Asbestos also will not make you cough or sneeze when you are breathing it in, so you won't feel like it is hurting you, and no amount is safe. The more you are exposed to the asbestos, the worse your chances are of getting any asbestos-related illnesses, and you can be exposed without even knowing it. Mesothelioma specifically is a big deal because you can get mesothelioma from being exposed to extremely small amounts of asbestos. In some cases, families of people who work with asbestos have gotten mesothelioma just from bits of the asbestos dust being on clothing that their family members came home from work in. So it's definitely obvious to assume, it's not even an assumption, that the actors in the poppy field scene were definitely, in fact, at risk. The Scarecrow was at risk. Honestly, the entire studio would have been at risk of mesothelioma because I am sure either from Scarecrow's everyday costume being worn all over set or the snowy poppy field scene, asbestos particles must have been floating around all of the time. So, a big question would be, did any of the cast or crew on the set of The Wizard of Oz end up with mesothelioma or any other kinds of lung cancers, asbestosis, due to the exposure? How about any diseases at all? What kinds of illnesses did they suffer later in life because they must have had some kind of issues, I would assume. One example is of the actress who played Auntie Em in The Wizard of Oz. Her name was Clara Blandick. I would like to share a little bit of her story because it might give some insight into the future lives of these stars of the iconic film. After the filming of The Wizard of Oz, Clara Blandick's health eventually declined, leaving her suffering from many different ailments by the time she was in her 80s. She chose to take her own life instead of suffering for an unknown amount of time due to unknown ailments. On April 15th, 1962, she got dressed in her best gown for the last time, and she took a fatal overdose, leaving a note that said, quote, "I am now about to make the great adventure. I cannot endure this agonizing pain any longer. It's all over my body. Neither can I face the impending blindness. I pray the Lord my soul to take. Amen." Be spreading its wings. The point is, the film has been littered with tragic choices, requirements, and some extremely unempathetic and absolutely absurd mistakes that have definitely had some profoundly negative effects on the lives of the real human beings behind the beloved characters of what was supposed to be an inspiration to generations to come, leaving many wonderful childhood memories in its wake. Instead, when you find out the truth about The Wizard of Oz in the filming, it can ruin the bliss of the childhood innocence you once knew, ruining The Wizard of Oz and possibly even your childhood altogether. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for sticking with me through these dreadful details. This is what should have been an amazing movie if it wasn't for the awful treatment of the film cast and crew. There is honestly so much more detail. Each character has their own horror stories, and then where they ended up health-wise, unfortunately all of them are pretty much very sad tales that end in sad fates. They all suffered in so many ways. So if you are interested, thumbs up this video. All of these characters were blatantly neglected by MGM, and it is awful. So let me know what you think. Thanks again for joining me today, and hopefully you will stick with me. I always like to encourage you to click on a video here at the end screen because I like hanging out with you guys, and I am super weird and am totally embarrassed. So I'm gonna go. Thank you so much, and I hope you will click on a video and continue to watch and talk crazy topics with me. Alright, bye guys. See you next time.